You've been told hard work is holy, that labor sanctifies you, that the more you give of your time, your mind, your soul, the more worthy you become. But what if it's all a lie? Not a gentle one, not a well-meaning myth, but a system of spiritual cannibalism, disguised as virtue. You were not born to be available to the world at all times. And yet, here you are, stretched thin across every hour, every screen, every crisis that doesn't belong to you. You answer every call. You respond to every message. You show up, even when your bones ache from being seen too much, touched too often, and never truly known. This is not purpose. It is psychic prostitution. You are sold, by your own conditioning, to the altar of usefulness. Nietzsche once said, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." Now imagine the damage done. When we're trained to worship effort more than truth, exhaustion more than impact, you've mistaken overextension for integrity. But the soul was never built for servitude. It was built for sovereignty. The world will not tell you this, because the world profits from your presence, not your power. And power begins where availability ends. The tragedy is this: you were never hated for disappearing. You were hated for making others feel your absence. In a world drunk on presence, your silence is sacrilege, your detachment, a rebellion. But here is the brutal, unspoken truth. We do not value what is always available. We grow numb to the things we can always reach. Even love turns invisible when it's too eager to stay. This is not cruelty. It's psychology. Even Nietzsche, sharp as shattered glass, understood it. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But when your why is to be liked, needed, accepted, your how becomes self-erasure. You give and give and give, until your presence becomes a background noise. Expected, ignored, devalued, not because you are worthless, but because you are always there. Scarcity breeds reverence. Distance creates mystique, and mystique is power. Even the gods are silent. Even the stars keep their distance. You've let the world consume you, drip by drip, favor by favor, sacrifice by sacrifice, thinking one day they'll see your worth. But they won't, because worth isn't in what you offer. It's in what you withhold. Withdraw and watch the gravity shift. You were never meant to be currency. You were meant to be a cathedral, visited, not owned, honored, not used. What's rare is sacred, and what's sacred is protected. So protect yourself by becoming rare again. You are more connected now than ever before, and yet, you've never felt more alone. This is the great modern contradiction. We drown in messages, but thirst for meaning. Every notification mimics significance. Every like fakes intimacy. Every reply is a counterfeit mirror reflecting nothing back. And still, you stay online. Still, you answer. Still, you reach across the void, hoping someone, somewhere, sees the real you. But no one sees through glass that fractured. Gurdjieff warned us. Modern man is asleep. His conversations are sleep. His friendships are sleep. His love is sleep. You're not connecting. You're performing. Digitally present. Spiritually vacant. You've confused visibility with belonging. Validation with truth. Access with closeness. And so, the soul fragments. Bit by bit. App by app. Until you are 1,000 versions of yourself. None of which feel like home. To be truly seen, you must first disappear. To be truly loved, you must first love your own silence. Connection is not built on contact. It is built on presence. The kind that exists even when words fall away. The kind that can only be found in the quiet. But the quiet terrifies you, doesn't it? Because in the quiet, there is no audience, no applause, no algorithm. Only you, and the hollow echo of how far you've strayed from yourself. The illusion shatters when you sit still, when the scrolling stops, when no one is watching, and in that terrifying silence, you meet your soul again. Solitude is not loneliness. It is not exile. It is not punishment. It is purification. The world fears solitude because it cannot manipulate you there. No trends, no followers, no applause. Just you and the mirror that never lies. In solitude, your masks melt. The roles you played, the smiles you rehearsed, the needs you bent yourself to meet, they dissolve in the silence. And what remains is sacred. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." But solitude arrests the chase. It halts the hunger. It interrupts the madness of becoming. So you can remember what you already are. You begin to see that much of what you called purpose was just survival in disguise. That the love you gave was often a bribe for acceptance. That the work you drowned in was your escape from being still. But stillness is not emptiness. It is presence without performance. It is the place where the soul sharpens, where silence becomes a scalpel, cutting away everything that is not yours. Solitude teaches you this brutal truth. If your value depends on your usefulness, then you are not loved, you are leveraged. So you walk away, not as revenge, not in anger, but as resurrection. You do not disappear to be missed. You disappear to remember. Because what the world forgets, the soul remembers. To set a boundary is to declare, "I am not here to be consumed." But the world will hate you for it. Because when you stop bleeding for others, they call you cold. When you stop explaining yourself, they call you arrogant. When you detach, they say you've changed. And they're right. You've stopped leaking your soul into bottomless vessels. You've stopped auditioning for love with your silence. You've stopped explaining your no. That's not selfishness. That's spiritual maturity. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But when you set a boundary, you force them to meet themselves. And that confrontation? It's unbearable to those still asleep." Mystique isn't manipulation. It's medicine. It's the echo of withheld presence. The sacred space between what is seen and what is sensed. In a culture obsessed with oversharing, mystique is rebellion. It whispers, "There is more here than I am showing, and you do not have access to all of me." That's what draws respect. Not noise, not sacrifice, but self-possession. You must become untouchable in your stillness. Not closed, but guarded like a temple. The temple does not chase visitors. It stands in sacred silence. And those who are ready will remove their shoes. Detachment is not disconnection. It is the refusal to make your identity dependent on how others receive you. It's the quiet strength of knowing you were whole before they came, and you will be whole when they go. This is the psychology of power. Boundaries protect your energy. Mystique protects your soul. Detachment protects your peace. There are parts of you buried in silence. Not forgotten, just exiled. You gave them away slowly. Each time you smiled when you wanted to scream. Each time you agreed to be liked. Each time you said yes just to be safe. These are not just memories. They are amputations. And yet, they're still alive. In the dark. In the corners of your mind. In the aching behind your smile. Waiting. Jung called it the shadow. The unconscious self, built from what you deny. But here's the secret. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your twin. It's your truth. It holds the fire you abandoned in the name of acceptance. You see, your rage was never a flaw. Your desire was never shameful. Your silence was not weakness. It was a scream the world refused to hear. So you locked these parts away, built a mask of virtue, and called it maturity. But healing begins the moment you crack that mask. When you descend into the underworld of your psyche and ask the most terrifying question, what did I kill in myself to survive? You'll find fragments. Your voice, your courage, your madness, your freedom. You'll find that you've been loyal to your pain, longer than to your potential. But you can reclaim it, piece by trembling piece. Not to become what you were, but to integrate what you lost. This is shadow work. It is not pretty. It is not polite. It is resurrection through fire. And only those willing to burn will ever know what it means to be whole. There is a holiness in walking away, not out of bitterness, but as an act of sacred reclamation. Withdrawal is not weakness. It is warfare, a quiet revolt against the noise that devours you. To retreat inward is to build a fortress around your soul. To become still is to become sovereign again. Gurdjieff taught that real transformation does not occur in the light of performance, but in the shadows of solitude. You must separate in order to see. You must die before you are reborn. But the world calls you selfish, cowardly, disconnected, because they cannot drink from a well that you've finally sealed. They were never thirsty for your truth, only for your availability. And now that you've disappeared, you become dangerous, because a person who no longer needs attention, approval, or applause is ungovernable. This is the spiritual essence of withdrawal. It severs the contracts you never signed, but always obeyed. The unspoken agreements that said, be who we want, give more than you have, and don't dare vanish. But now you vanish with power. You vanish with clarity, not to be chased, but to meet yourself at the altar of silence. There, in the innermost sanctum, you remember the language of your soul, the rhythm of your breath, the gravity of your existence. You are not a role. You are not a function. You are not their savior. You are a temple, and temples don't scream to be visited. There is something terrifying about a person who doesn't flinch, who doesn't explain, who doesn't need to be seen. That terror? It's not fear of the person. It's fear of what they represent. Power without noise, depth without performance, presence without permission. We live in a culture that equates loudness with strength, but the most dangerous beings in history, the prophets, the mystics, the awakened, were silent for long stretches of time. They were distant, not because they didn't care, but because they understood care is sacred. Nietzsche once wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." Your silence unsettles because it cannot be controlled. Your distance irritates because it cannot be accessed. And your calm presence? It mirrors back everything others are trying to escape. We mistake constant communication for connection. We confuse availability with value. But true presence doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It commands, not with force, but with stillness. There is power in not answering, in not reacting, in leaving space unfilled. Because what is not easily reached is instinctively respected. Silence is no longer passive. It is protest. It is poise. It is psychological gravity. Your withdrawal speaks louder than words. It says, I do not chase. I do not entertain. I do not explain. And the world, accustomed to your obedience, must now recalibrate. Respect is not requested. It is born in the absence of desperation. So disappear, quietly, elegantly, and when you return, if you return, you will be received like a storm, not because you shouted, but because you finally chose silence over survival. You will not find your soul in the noise. You will not reclaim your power in applause. You will not heal under the eyes of 1,000 strangers, pretending to care. To remember who you are, you must disappear. Not dramatically, not as a threat, but as a sacred act of self-return. Because noise is a drug, a constant hum that drowns out the ache of disconnection. But when the world grows silent, you'll hear it, the whisper beneath the chaos, the small, shaking voice that says, "I've missed you." That's your soul, not broken, just buried beneath obligations that were never yours to carry. In disappearing, you begin the descent, not into isolation, but into integration. You begin to realize you were not lost. You were overexposed. Too many hands in your light. Too many mouths in your mind. Too many versions of you scattered across other people's expectations. You've been visible, but never truly seen. Disappearing is not absence. It's refinement. The sculptor removes the excess to reveal the masterpiece beneath. And so too must you carve away everything that was built from fear, approval, and exhaustion. Then, and only then, can you hear the voice of your soul again. A voice that doesn't shout. It knows. It tells you when to speak, when to walk, when to love. It does not ask for permission. It does not seek performance. It simply is. And so are you, when you stop chasing the world and begin listening to the silence within it. The final betrayal is not by others. It is the one you commit against yourself, when you remain available to a world that would not notice your absence. So choose yourself, even if it means being misunderstood, even if it means being forgotten, because there is a difference between being liked and being free. This is the brutal truth that Nietzsche whispered through gritted teeth. That moral labor, the constant self-sacrifice for approval, is not noble. It is enslavement. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. And who have you obeyed? The family that praised your suffering? The friends who loved you only when you were useful? The culture that taught you value comes from being exhausted and agreeable? You were not born to serve a machine. You were born to burn quietly, in your own divine fire. Let them say you've changed. Let them whisper that you've vanished. Let them mourn the version of you that once fed their emptiness. Because now, you are untouchable. Not because you built walls, but because you became whole. Not because you became loud, but because you became still. You don't owe them your availability. You don't owe them your softness. You don't owe them your ruin. What you owe is to the self you buried beneath the debris of performance. You owe her resurrection. You owe him silence. You owe them presence. And so you disappear, not into absence, but into sovereignty, not to punish, but to remember. This is not the end. This is the rebirth, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. Because the soul doesn't shout, it becomes. And if the world forgets you, let it. You were never made to be remembered by the blind. You were made to remember yourself. If this reached something deep in you, it wasn't by accident. Somewhere in the silence between each word, your soul stirred. And if the world no longer understands the version of you rising from the ruins, let it misunderstand. Let it forget. You didn't come here to be seen. You came here to see yourself. So if you're ready to vanish from the noise and return as something untouchable, subscribe. Because here, we don't chase the light, we become it.